As we conclude the 2024 Iowa Ideas Conference, I want to extend a sincere thank you to the Gazette for creating this forum for such a positive, high-level discussion, all of the presenters and panelists for contributing to the dialogue, and certainly to all of you as active participants. I hope and trust that you've found the experience to be worthwhile. My challenge to all of us is to take the key questions and big ideas that were generated at the conference and keep the momentum moving forward. Each session included discussion of positive ideas that can eventually become public policy if we work together to make it happen. On behalf of all of us at ITC Midwest, thanks again for your participation in this year's Iowa Ideas Conference. We hope to see you all again next year.
Hello, I'm Christy Fisher, president of Kirkwood Community College. We're proud to once again partner with the Iowa Ideas Conference. I hope you walk away with several new ideas and valuable partnerships. The same kind of partnerships Kirkwood has with regional employers, industry leaders, and communities, where we help build a workforce pipeline that strengthens our economy and prepares Iowans for the future. Enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of everyone at the Gazette, we hope you've had a great Iowa Ideas Conference. We've had 2 full days of ideas sharing and connecting with more than 2,000 people who care about the state of Iowa. As we wrap with this year's event, we begin to plan for 2025. In a couple days, you'll be getting a survey, and we ask you to spend some time sharing your thoughts with us so that we can continue to build on the success of the annual event. Also, a reminder that the replays for the sessions will be available on iowaideas.com starting next week. And now it's time to welcome our closing keynote, Jen Loeb. In 2021, Jen completed her dream of climbing 7 summits and became the first woman from Iowa to climb the highest peak in every continent. Jen's also the only woman from Iowa to successfully climb Everest. She started mountain climbing back in 2010, and since that time has climbed mountains all over the world. Her published book, Shots from the Heart, includes 238 pages of photographs and journal excerpts from her travels, both near and far. Please welcome Jen Loeb. Now, Jen, excited to have you here, and I know this time is going to fly quickly, and I guess I should also remind the audience that if you have questions, please use the function at the bottom of the screen, and we will work some of those questions in to our conversation here. But I'm curious, you grew up in Iowa, you grew up in Jessup, you live near Marengo now. How did you get into climbing? What did some of those first climbs look like? And how did you know you wanted to keep going?
Well, it kind of, growing up, I was always very active, running around. I had lots of space to run around on a farm. And then in school, I was always athletic. I was a runner, always ran track and cross country. And so I had this love of movement and being physical, being physically active outdoors. And I had this innate love of the great outdoors. And, it didn't start out right away. I ran all through high school, and then I ran all 4 years at the collegiate level. And after college, some of the other women that I had ran with, they're like, "Hey, Jen, let's go backpacking." And so we did that, and that was fun. I really enjoyed that. But it wasn't really enough. Like, I wanted more of a challenge. And when you're backpacking through the mountains, you don't actually get to climb the mountains because the trails just it seems like they just weave through the valleys. And so, I could look and see people actually climbing peaks, and I was intrigued. I wondered, I had so many questions, like, how do you climb a mountain? What kind of gear do you need? What kind of fitness level do you need? What's the movement feel like? Can my body tolerate altitude? And so there was a lot of questions and no answers. And I thought, Well, that looks like fun. I don't have the foggiest idea how to climb a mountain. Never climbed a mountain in my life, and wasn't sure how to get started. I didn't know anybody that climbed mountains. I didn't have any connection to the mountain climbing world. And so I kind of was fumbling around in the dark for a while. I hopped on the internet and, I was trying to figure out, like, how do I even break into this? And I discovered there was such a thing as mountain climbing school. I thought, great, that's perfect, because I don't have any gear and I don't have any training. I have no idea how to climb a mountain. And so I signed up for mountain climbing school with zero experience, and they sent me a gear list. And so, of course, I had to spend hours shopping for things online, because it's not like I can buy these things locally. And so I bought a bunch of gear and showed up to mountain climbing school, and I knew I had a lot to learn, and I really did. It was overwhelming. There was so much, just in the learning the basics. And so I did my training on Rainier. I spent 7 or 8 days, just really, it's full immersion. You're living on a mountain, and this is how we do it, and this is how we climb. And so I passed that course, and then that kind of opened the door. And then I started signing up for some beginner climbs, not serious altitude and not seriously technical. And that was really the foundation, was doing these beginner climbs and starting to get comfortable on the mountain and starting to get some more confidence. And I found that the more I did it, the more I loved it. And it quickly became kind of an obsession, and it started to control all of my decisions as far as, the training and my lifestyle, trying to prepare myself and getting the gear and getting the vacation time to go do these expeditions. Like, it just kind of snowballed. And, I was stuck on this ride, and it was the thrill of a lifetime, and I'm still on it. And, I love it.
Well, I'm curious, you show up at mountain climbing school, and you said it's Mount Rainier. I've hiked mountains, small little mountains, in the Appalachians or things like that. And, that's not even on the scale. So you show up at mountain climbing school. I mean, what were those first few days like? Was there ever a point you were like, what have I done here?
No, I loved it. I loved it. I got there, and we had really heavy packs on, because, you have 8 days worth of food and your tents and fuel and, all this gear. And but I had done some training, and I thought, okay, I'm strong. I can do this. And I did. And, we're climbing, and I thought, wow, this is, new and different, but I thought it was a thrill, and I loved, getting to learn, like, how do we do this, and wow, this is hard, but it's fun. And so there wasn't any kind of regret at all.
Okay. Well, I'm curious. So you did some of those beginning hikes, and then you end up going for Denali. I'm curious, how did that come into play? That's a serious climb.
Yes.
And how did you get from those beginning hikes to want to take that next step? Was it just natural progression, and why'd you start there?
Well, I didn't start at Denali. I did these. You kind of work through a progression of climbs, and it seemed like you go to climbing school, and you learn how to climb, and then you do quite a few of these beginner peaks. And it seemed like each expedition I was doing was gradually more difficult, more altitude, more technical. And so, I was kind of working my way up to Denali. And the Denali expedition was actually where things really kind of it was a little bit of a turning point. When I got into climbing, I never had any intention of doing Everest. I never, in my wildest dreams, thought it would get that far. And so, when I got into climbing, I thought to myself, well, this is something new and fun, and I'll learn how to do this and have a good time and then move on to the next thing. And what happened instead was I got into this and loved it so much that I just kept going. And Denali is an incredibly difficult peak. You have heavy packs. The altitude is a serious factor. The weather is a serious factor. It's pretty grueling. And so, we went and we had a strong team, and we summited in good style. And after the expedition was over, we got off the mountain and we get showered up and get some clean clothes on, and we're celebrating our success. We're having our last meal together as a team. And the guides that I had gone with looked at me and they're like, well, Jen, you're ready for Everest now. And I started laughing at them because I thought they were teasing me. And, they like to tease a lot. And so I thought it was a joke. And so I started laughing. And they're like, no, Jen, we're serious. You should go. You're ready. And that, I kind of laughed it off again. I still thought they were teasing me and just kind of pulling my leg a little bit. And so, we wrapped things up and I flew back home to Iowa. And then those words kind of came back to me. And now the wheels are turning in my mind. I'm thinking to myself, they were serious. Like, they weren't joking. And do I want to do this? It was really an incredibly difficult decision to make. I spent all of the summer of 2013 kind of turning it over in my mind and trying to decide, do I really want to climb Everest? I don't know. There's so many moving parts that you have to take into consideration. I knew that if I was going to do this, it would consume my life. Like, I'm going to be eating, sleeping, breathing Everest. The training would consume my life. Putting the logistics together would consume my life. And trying to get all the pieces to come together, knowing full well, there's no guarantee you're going to summit. There's no guarantee you're going to come home in one piece. There's no guarantee you're going to come home at all. Do I really want to have my life completely consumed by this expedition and come home empty-handed, or not come home at all? And so there was a lot of things I had to take into consideration. I weigh all the pros and cons, and so those were some of the cons, like the time commitment, the energy commitment, just the training that I would have to do to prepare myself to get ready for that. But then on the other hand, I had the opportunity. By then I had most of the qualifications that I would need. I was qualified. If I wanted to sign up, they would allow me on a team. And so all summer long, 2013, I'm kind of tossing and turning and trying to figure out, do I really want to do this? And the one thing that swayed me into saying yes was I didn't want to have any regrets. And I didn't want to have to wonder, could you have made it, Jen? Don't know. You didn't even try, And so I didn't want to live with that. And I thought, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. And I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to do the work and give it 110%, and then, see where the chips fall, and wherever they fall, you have to be at peace with that. And so that was the summer of 2013. And so I made the decision to go. And then I also thought to myself, if I'm going to do Everest, like, I might as well finish the 7 summits, because by then I already had 3 out of the 7 done. And so I was like, okay, I'll do Everest. And then while I'm at it, I'll just finish the 7 summits. And so that's when things really kicked into high gear. It was 2013, and I really started pounding out some heavy duty expeditions, and did some of the others that were on the list of the 7 summits. And then in 2016, I went, and fortunately, I was able to summit, and it was epic.
Well, if we were writing a movie, you just told a movie in about the last 35 seconds, that time between 2013 and 2016. But
It would make a great movie.
I'm curious about the voice that was in your head pushing you to do that. Is that something that you'd heard, motivating, well, you don't know, you didn't even try. Where do you think that came from? Is that something that you were drawing on, throughout your running career? And was that something you'd thought of before?
No, that's just a really good self-awareness. Like, I know my personality type, and I know that if I have an opportunity and don't take it, and don't work to achieve something, like, I know I'm gonna kick myself later. And I didn't want to, this would be a lifelong thing. Like, that little voice in my head would never let it go, that, oh, Jen, you had this opportunity, and you just blew it. And so that was, like, I kind of know, like, that's how things are going to play out in my mind. And I didn't, it would be hard to live with myself if I didn't take the chance.
Talk a little bit about, committing to training. Iowa, you're certainly not living at elevation. How did life start to change when you're making that decision to commit? What do the workouts to kind of prepare yourself? I mean, you just finished Denali. How much time did you relax at all, or was it right into that, working out and maintaining that physical condition?
Yeah, so the training is really what kind of dominates my life as a whole. I'm constantly, trying to figure out, design workout programs. So I never had a coach. I never had a personal trainer. And, I said my background was running, so I was familiar with long endurance type of things. And so when I started out climbing, I'm trying to think of, okay, I need lots of endurance. I'm going to need lots of strength, because I have to be able to carry a pack up a mountain. And so to step up with extra weights, and, the speed, because I knew, like, there's a window. You have to hit the summit before your window closes, and then you start your descent. And so that was one of the things that appealed to me about climbing, was you kind of have this trifecta of all the things. You need speed, endurance, and strength, and it kind of forces you to be this really strong athlete. And so I thought about those things, and then when I sat down, I printed out a calendar, and I started writing in, okay, I'm going to run on this day, and I'm going to lift on this day. And then, like, I need to be able to carry a pack. So I put a sandbag I had a backpack. And so I put a sandbag in my backpack and started, walking, hiking with that. I would get on the Stairmaster. I was trying to mimic that movement of stepping up with the weight, stepping up for hours. And so, I designed a program for myself. And then after each expedition, I would get back home, and I would kind of think to myself, okay, what worked? What didn't? Did I need more endurance? Did I need more cardio? Was my strength good enough, or did I need to be stronger? So I would kind of fine tune things. And so by the time I got to the point where I'm climbing Everest, like, I have my fitness program pretty well dialed in, and I do train year round. There's really kind of 2 seasons, like off season and in season. And when I'm in season, then I'm actively training for an expedition, and I will kind of modify things based on that particular climb. Like, if I know I'm going to have to carry a heavy pack, then I'll train with a heavy pack. If I know the endurance is going to be, I need endurance for days, then I'll kind of modify things to get more endurance. And so it's a mix of cardio and lifting. And and it's not just the workouts either. Like, I really have to pay attention to nutrition. I have to pay attention to recovery. I don't want to get injured. I have to let my body heal up after a hard workout. I have to make sure that I'm getting enough sleep, so my body can heal up. And so that's really the thing. The training is all of that encompasses training, and it's really what kind of controls my day-to-day life. Is I'm always thinking about, okay, what's the workout I need to do today? I need to execute this workout, and you progress. I always, because I'm always working out, I always know where my baseline fitness level is, and then I'll progress and start ramping things up, and then usually a week before I leave for an expedition, I'll start to taper a little bit, and so I have fresh legs when I hit the ground in whatever country I'm going to be in.
I'm curious, you got to, you're going to climb Everest. What were those first few days? You arrive, you're hiking into base camp. Did you feel prepared? Were you nervous? What was that? Did you get there and think, well, this isn't quite like that, endurance that I was doing back home? What was that thought going through your mind as you started to get to base camp and beyond?
So, I mean, by the time you get to the point where you're climbing Everest, like, what kind of physical demands are going to be placed on your body, and so I had plenty of time to train for that. And I made the decision in 2013, and then the Everest expedition, I didn't even get to it until 2016. So there was 3 years where I'm kind of ramping up. I have all these other expeditions I'm kind of doing in the background, and then Everest is always, the wheels are moving on that one. And so by the time I actually got to Everest, the 3 years after a while, things start to feel like, this is such this big thing in the future, that I'm working on, and now it's here, and it's like, wow, it's real. Like, I'm finally here after 3 years of working my fingers to the bone, and now it's here, and it's real, and it's happening. And all that training and all that work that goes on behind the scenes, that's just to get you to the starting line. Like, now the expedition starts, right? Now the things are really happening and moving. I thought my fitness was good. I was well prepared, and really I was just stoked to finally be there after 3 years of working on it. And I had been to Nepal before. I climbed there before, and so I was familiar with the terrain and the culture and the food. Just excited to finally be there and get it, get things going, do this expedition.
Now, when you finally were there, how many folks were you with? What did what was the plan? And what did you, did things go according to plan?
For the most part, things go according to plan. On climbing expeditions, there's always going to be moments where things go sideways. I did get a pretty nasty GI bug on the way into base camp, and so I needed to get that cleared up. And then once you get to base camp, you do your puja ceremony, and then you start your rotations. There's 3 rotations to climb Everest, and each one you're going up to a higher altitude. The 3rd rotation is your summit push. And so I was pretty excited to be there, and you get there and you get settled in and you make yourself at home, because you're going to be there for 6 weeks, 2 months, doing those rotations and going through this acclimatization process. And so, yeah, I was thrilled. The weather was fairly decent, and thank God we had good weather on the summit push day. But there's always a little bit of fear. There's always butterflies. There's excitement. All these, you run the gamut of all the emotions, and there's always an element of the unknown on a climbing expedition. There's always hazards you have to to mitigate, whether it's the weather or avalanches or rockfall, icefall, bad route conditions. There's always things that could potentially happen, but you just stay focused on what I need to be doing right now. You stay in the present and you think about, okay, I'm climbing, I need to get across this ladder, or I need to clip into the rope and keep moving and watch where I'm putting my feet and one step at a time. And, there's a lot of moving pieces on every expedition. And when all the pieces come together at the right time, then you have success. And so we were a team of 3. There was one other client and then the guide and myself. And we all summited, and I was grateful for that.
What was that moment? I mean, what were you thinking in that moment? And how do you keep yourself present? Because the danger is certainly not, gone.
Yeah, that feeling of standing on the summit of the tallest mountain in the world, there's so much wrapped into that moment. You spend 3 years devoted your entire life to this single moment. And so you certainly celebrate at the top, but you also have to realize, like, the expedition is not over. Like, the summit is halfway. And in a lot of respects, going down is just as dangerous as the ascent. You're already tired, probably a little dehydrated. The weather can move in. It's easy to take a misstep. You're hypoxic, and so, but you're in an environment where there's no margin for error. Like, you really can't make mistakes up there in the death zone. That's when things turn tragic. And so, you certainly celebrate at the summit, and you have some time for reflection there, but you don't let your guard down, because it's not over.
We're getting a lot of audience questions here, but one of the questions is, how do you keep yourself motivated? You have a passion for this, but how do you keep pushing yourself through on those days that maybe training was difficult, or that, I mean, did you ever feel those dips in motivation?
I mean, certainly there's times where I get up in the morning and I'm tired, or I'm sore and hurting, and I think, oh, I don't really feel like working out today. And like, it's so easy to, like, oh, I want to skip today's workout, and just chill for a day. But then I have to realize, like, I'm going to go do this thing that's, I have this goal, like, I want to hit the summit of this peak, and I understand that it's really difficult, and I need to be prepared. And if you're not prepared, it's possible you're not going to summit. And it's also possible that, you could get hurt, or it could cost you your life. And so that's a great motivator to kind of be like, oh, suck it up, Jen, and go to the gym. Like, I can't skip, I can't skip leg day, that type of thing. So, and it's a lot of time and effort that I've devoted to, this objective, and then to not put in the work, it doesn't make sense. So, and honestly, like, I really do enjoy working out. I do a lot of my workouts outside, and that's kind of my happy place. That's a break in my day where I can just run through the woods and get that sunshine and fresh air. And that's what I live for.
You mentioned avalanches and rock climbs, or rock falls, and other completely treacherous scenarios with extreme calm, and you also talked about staying in the moment. How do you do that? Obviously, you're in extreme conditions. You're straining yourself to beyond what most humans have ever felt. How do you stay present in that moment?
I mean, that's really one of the tricks. You have this awareness, like, okay, I'm in this environment. It's really hazardous. There's a million things that could potentially happen and that aren't in your control. Like I can't control the weather, or I can't control avalanches or things like that, but I can focus on what I can control. And you have to realize, like, when you're climbing, I have to think about, like, what do I need to be doing right now? You know, right now I need to put my hand there. Okay, do that. And then you do that, and then in the next moment you're thinking, okay, what do I need to be doing right now? Again, I need to put my foot there. Okay, put your foot there. And so it's this constant, like, what do I need to be doing right now in order to be safe and to mitigate the hazards? And you have this awareness, like, okay, bad things can happen. And I kind of look at it as like a shield. Like I have this shield that I'm in, like a little bubble. And, you know, the hazards, like all these worries, you know, I can worry about this, or I can worry about that, but it's exhausting. And at that point, I don't have the mental bandwidth to worry about all the things that might happen. I have to worry about what I can control, and that's my movement and making good decisions that keep me safe and keep me moving. And you know, I need to stay hydrated. I need some nutrition. Okay, do that. Need to put sunscreen on. You know, control the things that I can control, and that's really all I have the energy for it at that point on a big, strenuous climb.
Now, you're not a sponsored climber, and you know, during the prep call, you mentioned that you funded Everest, taking out a loan, I think, against your house. But I'm curious, you know, uh, how have you been able to do all of this, and why are those risks? You know, certainly there's no guarantee. How do you kind of weigh, is this worth it?
Well, that was really one of the things that was kind of a big factor when I was considering back in 2013, when I was trying to make this decision. Do I really want to climb Everest? It's expensive, and I didn't have the money. And so I was trying to figure out, like, you know, how am I going to get that kind of cash? Uh, you know, and to even get that kind of cash and not be successful, like that would be, you know, terrible to take that kind of financial risk and then for nothing, right? If I came home empty handed. So there was lots of things that were really playing into decision making. And with the other expeditions, you know, they're significantly cheaper than what Everest cost. And so for those expeditions, you know, I was able just to pay for that with working a lot of extra overtime at my job. And then with Everest, you know, it's significantly more expensive than anything else. And so initially I was trying to get sponsored, and, you know, I would approach businesses and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Are you interested? And the answer was always no. So when I realized that sponsorship was not going to happen, then I kind of shifted gears into, okay, let's try and do some fundraising. And so we did that. I was selling T-shirts. We had a dinner with a silent auction, and there were a lot of friends and family that were, you know, trying to chip in. Somebody wanted to set up a GoFundMe, so we did that. And so, but at the end of the day, yeah, I ended up taking out a loan to pay for Everest. And I make this analogy because people really seem to focus on this money part quite a bit. And there have been times where people have given me grief about it. And so I make this analogy, like here in the States, people will buy a home and take out a 30-year mortgage, and nobody thinks twice about it. And, you know, they buy their dream home and spend the next maybe 30 years paying it off. And that's quite common, or at least it used to be. And, you know, when I bought my little house, like, it wasn't my dream home. It's just a simple little house. And it didn't take me 30 years to pay it off because it's really small and there's not much to it. And so, like, I didn't buy my dream home. I bought my dream expedition. And that was, my goal in life was I have these big dreams and I'm going to do what it takes to make that happen. And sometimes it's a little unconventional or uncharacteristic, but at the end of the day, I was the only person that could make that decision for myself. And I made the decision to do that. And I have no regrets. And if I had to go back and do it all again, I would. And I wouldn't change a thing. They were tough decisions for sure to make. I spent a lot of time trying to think it over. And I thought, I don't want to be, an old woman at the end of my life thinking to myself, man, I wish I could have done that. And I didn't have the money, but, I can always work longer and just delay retirement and get that money back. But I didn't want to have, like, this was an opportunity of a lifetime. I didn't want to pass it up. And so I had a lot of tough decisions to make and I made them and I don't regret it.
I'm curious, how much work do you have to do in between, and how do you balance the workouts and the workload that you have to do between some of these expeditions? I mean, you have to be working incredible hours to then accrue the PTO or to be able to step away for, a month expedition or a 2-month expedition.
Right. It's kind of at this stage of the game, it's really basically 2 full-time jobs. And so my day-to-day life, I'll admit it, like, my workload is crushing. And, I get up in the morning and I'm doing meal prep. I'll have my breakfast, I'll pack lunch, I'll pack supper, I'll pack snacks. And then I'm out the door and I'm doing workouts. And then I'll eat lunch on the go, get to work until late at night, get home and just fall into bed. And then, try and get some sleep because I have to get up and do it all again tomorrow. And, like, I'm not complaining. Like, this is what I've chose. And this is, how I have decided to live my life. And I love it. It's a lot. It's busy, no doubt about it. I usually work anywhere from 60 to sometimes close to 80 hours a week. And, I have to get workouts in and sometimes, I can't, if I have to take a day off because I need to do like a really long workout, then I'll try and balance things. So I try and be pretty creative with my scheduling, a little bit of flexibility with my scheduling. And, how do I find the time to do these workouts? And I try and, it's 2 full-time jobs and it really is a lot of work, but I love it. And so I keep going.
All right. We have a couple questions, both surrounding food from the audience. So folks are interested in what your diet is on a normal day and, with the training, but then also what does one eat and drink, when you're at that very high altitude at Everest or any high altitude, I guess.
Yeah. So right. So on a normal day, when I'm here in my Iowa life, I'll usually have oatmeal and coffee for breakfast. I want those carbs and something that's dense. It's gonna, fuel me through a long workout. And then usually, for the rest of the day, I'm going to be focused on making sure I get enough protein. Usually, I eat a lot of lean protein, the fish and chicken and things like that. But I do love a nice steak, and so some carbs, fruits and vegetables. I don't get too concerned with just being micromanaged about it. If
Oh, I think we've
lost
there we are. You're back.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if I have a craving for something, I will do that in moderation. I do love a good piece of chocolate. There's that. And so, as far as what I'm eating on a mountain, one of the side effects of extreme altitude is a loss of appetite. And so, something that I would eat with no issues at low altitude, you'll get to high altitude and you really have to force yourself to eat. And you also have to think about, well, things are going to be frozen. Can I eat that if it's frozen? Like if I'm at a lower altitude, say I'm here in Iowa and I'm having like a chewy granola bar, that's fine. But at 20,000 feet, that chewy granola bar is going to be hard as a brick. And it does happen where people will break teeth or fillings fall out or caps fall off or crowns fall off. And so there's that kind of thing. So I have to think about, is this even going to be doable at an extreme altitude? And so things like electrolyte drinks or quick energy, right? Some like little stinger waffles. Those are quick energy, and chocolate I can eat when it's frozen. So lots of the camps will have lots of carbs, just to kind of get the calories and get the fuel that we need when we're having big days of calorie expenditure.
I'm curious how you do. Oops, sorry. I'm curious also how you research some of these, the climbs that you want to do. How do you learn about the conditions? There's one thing to read about an expedition. It's another thing to get there and feel it. How do you go about researching and figuring those things out?
Well, there's so much of that stuff that's available on Google. I can pull up any mountain and figure out, okay, like what route do I want to take? What's that style of climbing like? Is it glacier travel? Is it rock? Is it mixed glacier and rock or ice? And so the routes will have descriptions, and you can figure out like, okay, this is, a 6 weeks expedition, or you can pound this one out in 3 days. You can pull up any route like on Rainier, and it'll give you detailed descriptions as far as how long it takes and the type of movement, the grade of that climb, how many feet. And so all of that stuff is available. And I'm so wrapped into like the climbing websites and social media pages that I can see what people are posting and be like, oh, wow, that looks like a beautiful peak. I love the line. I love that style of movement. So, I'll look into it, and if it appeals to me, then I'll be like, yeah, let's do that one. So I'll add that to the bucket list. And, my bucket list is a little bit out of control.
I'm curious about, summiting in Antarctica. That's a place that so few people get to go. What was that experience? And was there extra, or special requirements there that you had to work through?
Oh, sure. Antarctica is really an incredibly special place. It's like being on a different planet. And when you're inland a little bit, it's nothing but snow, and where we were, snow and mountains. And so you're on a glacier the whole time and just living on that glacier. There's nobody else there except for other climbers or people that were skiing to the South Pole. And so you're there with just this really small community of other adventure athletes. And the climb itself was pretty straightforward. It's not too crazy. And really small number of people up there. We were probably 7 or 8 people on the day that I was summiting. And, it's 24 hours of daylight. The sun never sets, and it moves in the sky, but it's just really, it's 24 hours of broad daylight, which is a little bit disorienting, because then you're like, is it time for breakfast, or is it time to go to bed? I don't know. You just kind of look at your watch to try and figure out a schedule. But it's still cold. It's summit day was probably maybe -40 on summit day. So yeah, still wearing all the big, heavy parkas and heavy boots, and trying not to get frostbite. But it's really pristine there. It's really beautiful. It's really remote, really difficult to get to. And actually, when you get there, it's also difficult to get out. And so we got stranded there for an extra 2 weeks. And so, there's not much going on in Antarctica. There's no cell signal, there's no TVs. And so we would find different things to do to entertain ourselves. Somebody had Scrabble. And so we played a lot of Scrabble. And I'm good if I never have to play Scrabble again in my entire life. But yeah, it's just, it was epic in its own way. And I really had a great time on that expedition. We had a nice, strong team, good people. And so it was super fun. And every expedition is kind of epic in its own way and has its own special place in my heart. And that was a good one.
I'm curious, when you've completed so many, few people complete all the seven tallest summits, or the tallest seven on each continent. Where do you find that excitement? Once you've summited Everest, are other peaks as exciting? Or, once you've been to Antarctica, how do you get excited about that next expedition?
Oh, I get excited about every expedition. They're all, I just get stoked for every trip. It's just this anticipation of like, yeah, I'm going to go do this fun thing. And, here's some place I've never been before and a peak I've never been on. And so there's always this element of what's the peak like? What's the climbing like? What's the culture like? The food, the language, the customs. There's so much to learn and so much to do. And I just get excited to go out and explore someplace I've never been. And even with as much as I've done, like I still only feel that like I've only just scratched the surface. Like there's so much more to do, and there's so much more that I haven't been there yet. I haven't done this one yet. And so it's like, oh, I feel like I gotta go do this thing. And here's this cool place to go check out I've never seen before. And so, yeah, I just get stoked for every trip and just having fun and getting out there and being active outdoors. And it's what I live for.
I'm curious if there's anything you're afraid of. And I ask that just from you're putting yourself into some of these scenarios where they're extreme. And so it's not going to be heights. It's not going to be, how do you manage fear?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that one a lot. There is fear. Like I'm not immune to fear. But you really have to think like I kind of look at fear as like it's on a continuum. Like at one end of the spectrum, you have complete fearlessness and no fear whatsoever. On the other end, you have, extreme fear where you're just paralyzed with fear. I think it's kind of, for me personally, I think it's healthy to be like somewhere in the middle, like to have some fear to keep you sharp, to have an awareness. Like I'm in this environment that's really hazardous. There's a lot of things that can go wrong here. So it's important to be aware, but you do have to manage the fear. I heard this thing somebody said one time. They said, well, fear can be in the car, but it doesn't get to drive, and it doesn't get to control the radio. Like fear has to sit in the back seat. And I thought that's a really good analogy. Like fear can be here, but it's not going to dictate what I can and cannot do. And so you just manage it. And that's kind of going back to what I said before of like staying present in the moment. Like I'm not going to worry about all these things that could happen or might happen. I have to focus on what I need to be doing right now. I have to stay present in the moment, and I have to control the things that I can control and not worry about the things that I can't control.
Has that gotten easier the more experience you get, or is each climb its own unique set of circumstances?
I think what's happened over time is like, everybody has their risk zone, their bubble that they can, manage risk. Some people are not high risk people, and that's fine. And so their kind of bubble is smaller. I think what's happened for me is over time, as so many expeditions, like my risk factors, my bubble has gotten bigger. And so things that would have given me paralyzing fear, 10 years ago, now I've, learned to like, oh, okay, I've done this before, or I've been here before, and I can handle this kind of risk. And so my risk zone has gotten bigger, but it's, I'm not being careless. I still will do everything that I can to climb safely. But, you think about like people being on a ladder, like some people might be a foot off the ground on a ladder, and that would be as far as they want to go, and they're terrified, and that's fine. But some people might be, on the top rung of that ladder, and they're comfortable there, and that's also fine. So, I've kind of pushed myself out. I've forced myself to kind of step outside of my comfort zone. And so now that's bigger. It's gotten bigger over time, but you still manage the risk, you manage the fear, and you still, like, I'm still climbing. I'm still doing everything I can to climb safely and manage objective hazards.
And I'm curious,
Does
talk
that
about
answer
that.
your question?
Yes, absolutely. You can take climbing as a metaphor for, challenges of life in a lot of ways. The mountain climbing, and there are things that go according to plan, and you've shared some moments where they don't necessarily go according to plan. And I'm curious, what advice do you have for people that may have their own challenges or their own set of challenges? How, what parallels or, how do they make a plan to approach that?
Yeah, there really is a good parallel between like an expedition and just life in general. Like there's an objective, like you're trying to do something, there's hazards, there's unknown, you're trying to achieve something in both of these scenarios. And so I always tell people, I take it one step at a time. Like every peak is climbed one step at a time. Like I try and bite things off in smaller, bits, and so it's actually chewable, right? If you bite off more than you can handle, then it's easy to get overwhelmed and to just stop. And so, another thing that I always say to myself is, my parents used to say that this to me, like Rome wasn't built in a day. And so it's like, okay, day after day after day, I have this plan, and I'm going to work on it day, and I'm going to take off, just chip away at things a little bit every day. And when things come up, there's always going to be something that comes up, that a hazard or an obstacle that I have to overcome. Sometimes maybe you just take a break. Sometimes it needs some patience to just kind of get through things. Sometimes it's a step back and then a step forward again. Sometimes it's like, okay, plan A didn't work. Now I'll move on to plan B, some creative problem solving, or plan C. And then it gets, you just keep working on down the line. And sometimes, when all the pieces come together, you have a successful expedition and you make it to the summit. And sometimes, things just happen and you don't make it to the summit. But I tell people this too, like that, if you don't achieve your goal, like that doesn't mean you failed. You just didn't, it didn't work out. Like the mountain is still there. It'll be there again tomorrow and the day after that. Like you can always, learn what you need to learn from your failures. Maybe my nutrition wasn't on point. Maybe my fitness level wasn't as good as it needed to be. Or maybe it was bad weather or bad route conditions. Okay, well, those change all the time. Come back next year and learn, like you learn with everything that happens. You learn how to handle things better. And if you have a failure, you learn what you need to learn the lesson from that failure, and then go back and try it again. So there's all kinds of parallels, and it really is a good kind of metaphor. Expedition is like life in a lot of ways. There's hazards, there's unknown, but there's also, great success and achievement and joy, and so there's all the things.
You have to be an intense person to work with. Do you ever have a day where you are just, you know, do you ever dial back that intensity? What does that look like?
I do have to. I mean, I can be intense. I'm not intense all the time. That's exhausting to be intense all the time. Um, most of the time I'm just trying to do my workouts and trying to go about my day-to-day stuff, get my food, get groceries, get gas, go to work. um, I have moments of intensity where it's like, oh, let's go, but I'm not like that all the time.
No, I say that somewhat in jest, just because, when you
Oh,
think about an employee too, like there are few people, like, oh, well, you've climbed Everest, like you're achieving at a level that, most people don't reach. And so just, to have, that experience, it's kind of like, I'm curious what a day off that drive looks like. And one of the questions that just came in, is just, have you ever failed to reach the summit of a mountain that you've tried for?
oh, sure. Yeah. There's always things that, there's been times where we didn't summit because the route melted out, and now it's too unsafe to continue. One time I didn't summit because the weather was bad. So yeah, there have been times where it didn't work out. But like I said, the mountain will be there tomorrow, and we've managed our hazards, and I've lived to climb another day. And so, I can always go back and try it again. So yeah, sometimes, when you really have your heart set on something and it doesn't work out, that can be a tough pill to swallow. But it's more important to be safe and go back and try again. The fact that, like, your life is always more important than a summit. That's one of those things that I always tell people when they are concerned about my safety. Like, I always tell them, like, I'm gonna be safe, I'm gonna climb smart, and I'm gonna make good decisions up there. And no summit is worth. I have people ask me, is it worth dying for? No, it's not worth dying for. You climb as safely as you can, and you manage hazards and live to climb another day.
Well, Jen, you mentioned that your bucket list is long, and I'm curious what's next. You mentioned the Alps. You had recently been climbing in the Alps. What's next?
Yeah, that's where I was at this summer. I spent some time in the Alps, doing some peaks there. I do have an extensive bucket list. I'm not done climbing. There's so many peaks. I'm kind of just now, I got home from the Alps, and you have a little bit of recovery period, let your body heal up a little bit. And so now I'm back into training. I'm not actively training for an expedition right now. I'm just doing my maintenance workouts. And then right now I'm looking at projects for summer 2025. I don't have anything quite set in stone just yet. I'm still, working on the logistics and how many days off of work I need and things like that. So, it's a lot of work behind the scenes. But I always tell people too, if they want to follow on social media, they can find me. I have a page on Facebook. It's Iowa Climber Jen. If they punch that in as one word, that's where I post updates like, hey guys, I'm in the Alps, and today is our summit push for Mont Blanc, and here's a picture of our team. Here's a picture of the route, and today we're at Camp 1, and we're eating ramen noodles, that kind of thing. So sometimes if I have a signal, I'll post updates of climbs, or sometimes if I'm speaking somewhere, I'll post updates like, hey, I'm speaking here, I'm speaking here. And so they can find me at Iowa Climber Gen on Facebook. And so if they want to know where I'm going to be at summer 2025, that's the place to, once I don't have it set in stone yet. So I can't make any announcements because there's nothing to announce right now. But
That's
that's where
fair.
to find, that's where to find the information.
You'll have at least one new follower after this. So,
Great.
Jed, I've appreciated this hour. I could go another couple hours asking questions, but
Yeah.
I appreciate the time that you've shared with us today. It's a fantastic story, and may you have many good years of expeditions ahead. It's just a phenomenally interesting story in every way. So I appreciate that. And to our audience, we appreciate your support for Iowa Ideas and your support of the Gazette. And for those who have not subscribed, there is going to be an opportunity for you to do that for a special that will come to you via email. Thanks again to all of our sponsors, and to our attendees. Thank you for making Iowa Ideas another fantastic year. With that, we have completed our edition of Iowa Ideas for the year. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, everybody.